Good to start.
Mismoil David, Adonai Roi, Lo Esai. Binotesha yal bitseni al me menuchot yanachaleni. Nafshi yishovei. Yancheni b'maglet tzadeh l'ma'an shemo. Gam ki elech b'gitz al mavet. Lo yirara ki atai imadi. Shiftecha u'mishantecha hema yenachamoni. Ta'aroch lefanai shulchan neged tzurirai. Bishanta v'shamen roshi kosir vaya. Ach v'chesed yudifoni koyam mechayai v'shabeti b'veit Adonai le'orech yamim. Friends, I've chanted for you the words of our 23rd Psalm. In moments when we are searching for strength, for comfort, for a sense of shalom, we often turn to the psalmist. And so at this time, I invite you to recite these words with me as we say together. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside the still waters. He restoreth my soul. He guideth me in straight paths for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Thou preparest a table before me in the presence of mine enemies. Thou hast anointed my head with oil. My cup runneth over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of the Lord forever. In the rising of the sun and in its going down, we will remember her. In the blowing of the wind and in the chill of winter, we will remember her. In the opening buds and in the rebirth of spring, we will remember her. In the blueness of sky and in the warmth of summer, we will remember her. In the rustling of leaves and in the beauty of autumn, we will remember her. In the beginning of the year, and this week when it ends, we will remember her. When we are weary and in need of strength, we will remember her. And when we are lost and sick at heart, we will remember her. When we have joys we yearn to share, we will remember her. So long as we live, she too will live, for she is now a part of us, as we remember Shirley Stone. To her children, Mark, Marcy, Steve, and Deborah, also to Phyllis, Steve, and Lisa, to her brother, David, her grandchildren, Melissa, Robbie, Brian, Emily, and Sam, also to Amanda and Shayna, and to her precious great-grandchildren, to Paxton, Harlow, Presley, and Miriam. To all the members of the family and to so many dear and treasured friends, so many of you who were able to join us in person, and those who will be watching via the live stream. We join our hearts together today to remember, but also to celebrate the beautiful life of your beloved Shirley. Our sages have taught us that life is a journey and death a destination. We've also been taught by our sages that while death, like birth, is a holy moment, there is something a little extra holier, a little more uplifted when our loved ones die between the days of awe, between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. We know that birth is a beginning and death a destination, but that life is a journey, a sacred pilgrimage to life everlasting. And today we're here to review Shirley's journey, a journey that spanned more than 96 years. a journey that began here in Cleveland. She was born on January 9th, 1927, to her Hungarian immigrant parents, Alex and Margaret Unger. Shirley's very first home was in the Buckeye area before the family finally settled in the famed Glenville neighborhood. And while attending Glenville High School, Shirley became close with a wonderful group of friends, all of them in the same sorority. They would spend their time socializing, but also committed to writing letters to soldiers who were away at war. After the graduation from high school, the group remained close, and they called themselves simply the girls. The girls, as Shirley would refer to them, would get together as they grew into adulthood to play Maj and other weekly events, and they were close their entire lives. And while I'm not sure if any of the girls are physically with us today, I think some of the daughters of the girls are here, so I know you remember. And you probably remember that some of the girls, some of your mothers, were given the title of aunt. Some of Shirley's children and certainly grandchildren referred to them as aunt. So they were tight, they were very close. And growing up, Shirley always knew, even when times were tough, she always knew that she was very loved and adored by her mother and her father. You see, her mom, Margaret, suffered greatly with tuberculosis for many, many years. She was always sickly. She was in and out of hospitals. And so many of Shirley's childhood years were spent living with relatives, her aunt. In her teen years, with her mom so ill and her father working, Shirley made a decision on her own to move into the Orthodox orphanage in Cleveland. You see, from even an early age, Shirley demonstrated independence and tenacity. The time spent away from her parents certainly affected her, but Shirley never doubted how much she was loved by her mom and dad. Following that graduation from Glenville High School, she went immediately into the workforce in a secretarial position, and then the war ended and soldiers were returning home. One of the soldiers that Shirley had written to during those high school years was the older brother of her high school friend, Pearl Moss. When Bobby Moss returned home to Cleveland, he met up with Shirley, and the two began to date. Shirley was just 19 years young when she and Bobby married on November 9th, 1946. 2 years later, Mark, you arrived, and then just a few years after that, Marcy, you entered into this world with you and your brother completing this beautiful Moss family portrait. Bobby and Shirley remained married for 35 happy years until the moment of his very unexpected sudden passing. He was only 58 years old at the time. Theirs was a marriage built on love. And as I sat with Marcy and Mark yesterday, they shared that they saw a marriage with their mom and dad that had a lot of love and a great friendship and mutual respect for each other. You said that your mom loved your dad dearly and that he adored her. They had wonderful times together. They enjoyed the company of great friends and family. And Shirley and Bobby's home was that place where if you happened to walk by or drive by and you saw that a light was on, you knew you could knock on the door. It didn't matter what time of day or night. Shirley always had a pot of coffee on, and she had food for any visitor, anytime. And Mark and Marcy, when you were old enough, maybe in your mid-teen years, your mom went back to work. First she went to Diane's card shop at the old Severn Shopping Center. And then she went and got her what I'll call more of her career, her position at Mount Sinai Hospital, where she worked in the billing and insurance department as a patient representative. Some of us who are here today gathered together in 2011. And at that time, we gathered to remember and celebrate the passing of your beloved Paul, father to Deborah and to Steve. I want to share with you words that Shirley shared with me about the passing of Paul. When I was preparing my remarks for Paul's funeral, here are some memories that Shirley shared with me. You may know the story, but I think it really needs to be repeated. As your mom, Dorothy, had passed away after an illness and many health challenges. She was hospitalized at Mount Sinai. So your dad, Paul, would go to check on billing and insurance things, and there were two sections. There was the A through M and M through Z. Shirley was in charge of the end of the alphabet, so Paul Stone had to talk to Shirley. After Dorothy had passed and some time had gone by, Paul started thinking about Shirley. She was a nice lady. And he went up to the hospital, and he wanted to get to know Ms. Moss. So he showed up to the hospital one day, entered her office, and began talking to her. Shirley was a little suspicious, and she thought that Paul was there to complain about a past bill or something. But Shirley said she realized that that was not the case, and so she stood up, and she lowered her reading glasses, and she demanded, "What's this all about, Mr. Stone?" And then Shirley went on to tell me the story. She said that Paul confessed that he wanted to take her out on a date, and she was somewhat shocked. And all she could think of saying in the moment was, "Call me at 9 o'clock tonight." And so Paul did. He called Shirley at 9 o'clock that night, and the next week Paul had a beautiful evening planned for him and Shirley, and they continued to date. And he courted her, in her words, in a very romantic and passionate way. Daily, Paul would come to the hospital where she worked, and he would leave her cards and flowers. And when the relationship progressed and Paul proposed marriage, he reminded Shirley of the benefits of his last name being Stone, because Paul said if she had been in charge of the first part of the alphabet, it would never have happened. He could have ended up, if his last name was Bernstein, he said to her, he would have been marrying and proposing to someone else. Paul Stone and Shirley Moss were both very lucky. Both of them were in love, not once, but twice. They were lucky. Here they were, getting married, adults in their 60s, acting like teenagers, and both feeling that they had been truly blessed. And their marriage lasted 24 years. Together they loved to go to the orchestra, the ballet, they traveled, and he remained romantic up to his last days, leaving her little notes on stationery, scraps of paper, napkins. And her children found all these notes. Some of them were hilarious. All of them started off saying, "To Shirley Moss Stone," and they were always signed, "From Paul H. Stone, your husband." Shirley was blessed not once but twice. She was lucky to be in love twice. And she would say that her love for Paul at that point in her life was a gift to herself, but also a gift to her children and her family. Her children remember a mom who was loving and so interested in what everyone was doing. He said sometimes she was a little nosy, but always interested. And she was good at giving advice, even if you didn't ask for it. He said sometimes she could be a little stubborn, sometimes opinionated, and she usually got her way. But I think it's this strength and her fierce independence that were probably among her greatest qualities. You knew a mom who was an avid reader, always reading on her Kindle. You knew a mom who adored her cat companion, Baby. And you knew a mom who was an enormous sports fan. Just last week, Mark, she was watching a Browns game with you. You knew a mom who, when she wasn't working at Mount Sinai, volunteered for Mount Sinai Hospital. And she also volunteered her time with you, Marcy, performing in those fun and silly plays that were used as fundraisers for the Jewish Children's Foster Home, an organization which we all understand now why was so near and dear to Shirley's heart. A mom who was interested in the arts. You knew a mom who loved ballet, the orchestra, opera, and you knew a mom who looked forward to those weekly Sunday dinner gatherings and all the holidays and family celebrations. Robbie, you shared with me that she was a grandmother and a mom who was known to be a wonderful cook. Her amazing dishes, her Hungarian recipes, all delicious. You knew a grandmother, Robbie, who tried to even cook healthy, and you said those never worked out. Those were the worst dishes. But when she did her stuff, she was amazing in the kitchen. Marcy and Robbie, you were lucky to have the in-town grandmother. And Marcy, You saw the in-town, Marcy and Mark, you were lucky to have her in town. Marcy, Mark in Detroit, forgive me. Marcy, you saw a lot of each other, so very close. And while your brother was in Detroit, a little further away, I'm told, Mark, that it was 5-6 times a day you and your mom spoke. We won't go into the details of how she reacted when she dropped you off at Ohio University. She was a mess for several days, but the closeness and the love that she had with both of her children was immeasurable. And to Steve and Deborah, we have to mention that the word step was not allowed, not with Shirley. It wasn't in her vocabulary. She adored all 4 of her children, and she treasured all of you, and she was so proud of what she would look at as a beautifully blended family. This meant everything to Shirley. Together with Paul, Shirley made sure to enjoy every possible moment she could with her grandchildren, whether this was in Cleveland or Detroit. Emily and Robbie, the in-town children. Emily, she and Paul made it there for your marching band moments, the dance recitals, and I know how much you loved cooking and baking with her. And Emily, you shared this little note with me. I guess you wrote love letters to your grandmother on many occasions, and the last one you wrote to her said this, and you asked that I share it with everyone. Emily wrote, "Grandma darling, the love you have shown us has helped us move forward throughout our lives. You have touched my personal life in so many different ways. I can picture Grandpa and Papa Bob just waiting to dance the eternity away with you, laughing, loving, and having a good time till the end of time. Love you, Emily." And Robbie, all the soccer games that they came to, Melissa's cheerleading in Palms, and I know Melissa and Shirley enjoyed a special grandma-granddaughter cruise, just the 2 of them together. And when Melissa was living in New York, she came up to visit. The 2 of you taking over New York, going to Broadway shows, late-night cocktails. And then the trips out to Denver for Sam's birthday, for your bar mitzvah. They were you being the youngest of the group, they were a little bit older, maybe couldn't travel quite as much, but they really look forward to those times with you, Sam. Shirley and Paul did their best to be there for the family, and Brian's football games, but in more recent years, how Grandma Shirley loved when Brian and his 3 little ones would come up from Florida to see her. This meant the world to her. Her great-grandchildren were a special source of love and pride for her. And whether you knew her as Grammy Shirley or Gigi, she just adored you. In a moment, friends, we're going to hear words from the heart from 2 members of the family. We are taught that words from the heart enter directly to the heart. And I know that Shirley touched the hearts not just of her children and her children who married into the family and her grandchildren and great-grandchildren, and Miriam, of course. But those of you here know her warmth. You know how much she loved you. You know how much she loved your moms and your dads. And so, that being said, I want to first call on Steve, who has words to share with us at this time.
So it's nice to see all of you. Thank you very much for coming out. And to honor Shirley, a life well lived, certainly. So I talked with Berkowitz-Kumin-Bookatz, who said, you know what, it's going to be kind of solemn, so you can tell a story that has a light touch to it. So I had an hour and a half prepared. Robbie tells me a tight 10 works better. So I'll start with congratulating my father. He came up to me, a lot of people don't know, my father actually took out a couple of women before Shirley. Because my father always thought of himself as an I, and at this point, it was an I for the first time. He always was a we person because he was married to my mother for 40 years, married to Shirley for 26. Both great marriages. And so I said to my dad, well, he came up to me, he said, it's about, 5 or 6 months after my mother passed away, he came up and he said to me, do you mind if I start dating some women? And I said, the only thing I would mind is if we were dating the same women. So date who you want to date. So the first woman he took out agreed with everything he said. One date. It drove him crazy. The second woman said right on after everything my father said. That drove him crazy. And then he went and sought out Shirley. And she certainly didn't agree with everything that he said. I can pretty much tell you that. However, they formed a wonderful bond and were very fortunate in a second marriage to have what they had for as many years as they had it. So I took my father out after he told me that he was thinking of marrying Shirley. I said, I think it's a great idea. I took him out to lunch and I said, but I want to congratulate you. And he said, on what? I said, you get to be your age. Do you realize how outnumbered the men are as opposed to the women? There was many more women than men. And I said to my dad, you did something that I thought was impossible, and I want to congratulate you for that. And he said, what was it? He said, I said, you accomplished the almost impossible. You found the one woman in this city who has less money than you do. And so, money never mattered to my father, as long as he had the love of a good woman, and he was able to find that twice. So I met Shirley. She was a very nice woman. I had really no idea what kind of woman she was. And I was to find out she was a woman of enormous strength. When her children say she usually got her way, she always got her way. There wasn't nothing usual about it. Yeah, she liked to manipulate things, but I thought, okay, he's going to marry Shirley, and that's good, and we're going to have, a stepmother. And it didn't work out that way. What Shirley did for Deborah and I and Sam was to bring together a family. And so these people, there are very few stones left. We're a small but spunky band. There's Deborah, there's Sam, there's me. But there's a lot of mosses. Everywhere you look, there's mosses. So I never thought of inheriting this family because I was one of those guys that kind of stayed to myself. Shirley saw to it from the beginning that she said, you are my son, you are my family now becomes your family. Yeah, right, okay. Anyway, the point is, that's exactly what happened. And it wouldn't have happened without Shirley. Because she had and envisioned, and I don't know how she could do this, but she envisioned what a second marriage would be like and what the melding of two families would be like. And she told us point blank, no steps, as the cantor said, there's no step this or step that. I view you as my children, and of course I then began to view her as my mother. So for me, it's a little difficult. Anyway, I wore a yellow tie. I talked to my dad. He said he probably wasn't going to be able to make it, but his tie did. I went into Shirley's closet, and I was able to take this for Paul, and I thought it was only fitting for him to make it. So, anyway, it's one of those days where hopefully we can celebrate, as they say, a life well lived. And I will turn it over to you. We'll bring up one of the many mosses.
Thank you, Steve, for those heartfelt and funny words. Thank you so much. As Robbie, her grandson, is going to come up to share some words, I have to just mention, I see that the women in the family are wearing these beautiful big flowers, some on their clothing, some in their hair. Did these all belong to Shirley?
Yes.
Did she used to wear these a lot as well?
Yes, that
all
was her
the time.
signature.
That
either
was her
a
signature.
brooch or a flower.
The brooch or the flower. Well, you wear them in the best of health. We're now going to call on her grandson, Robbie.
So, I decided to come after a professional broadcaster, so hopefully I live up to that. So I wanted to make sure that both sides of the family were represented. As my Uncle Steve said, it was a lifelong pursuit of hers to make sure that this blended family became one family. And then I happened to marry into a blended family myself and understood that her family is one family. So my recollections of my grandmother is that she spent time raising her children to raise us properly. But just like anything else, my grandmother, she didn't necessarily trust that all the way, and so she would spend a lot of time individually with us as well. So if you knew my grandmother, she left nothing to chance, and she was one of the strongest women I've ever been around. And the biggest thing that I think her legacy is for me and the family and our family is, I feel like there's strong men that are uncomfortable around strong women, and we don't have that problem. And we all kind of chose those strong women for ourselves, and we didn't shy away from it. And my grandfather was a good model for that, and my grandmother was the center of our family. We'll miss her very, very much.
Thank you, Robbie. Friends, as we prepare for the rites of burial, let me just share a couple brief announcements with you. Anyone wishing to make a contribution in memory of Shirley, the family has asked that you might consider one of three opportunities. One is the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum, or the Cleveland Clinic Children's Hospital for Rehabilitation, or another opportunity is an organization known as Reach Out and Read of Greater Cleveland. Following our service here at the cemetery, the family will be receiving visitors at Point East in Beechwood. The address is 27500 Cedar Road, and visitation will conclude at 5 p.m. this afternoon. I just organized. Okay, you know the right family. Am I a little Flemish?
No, you know who she is.
Got a lot of names.
Out of things.
I know it's Mark. Phyllis, Marcy's. Yeah, Sam. Brian. Where's Brian? Brian, where's Brian? Hi, Brian. My condolences. And Melissa? Melissa's not here. Hi, Brian.
Did you meet Sam?
Sam and I go way back.
And Baby the cat.
And Baby the cat. Right.
Yeah.
I met Sam before I met Baby the cat.
Okay. Okay, good.
Alright, so friends, what I'm going to do is, in a moment, I'm going to ask you all to stand. And grandchildren, come on forward. Steve, Deborah, come on forward. So we're going to come forward for this moment. So we're going to come up. I'll move this out of the way. And I'll take the microphone. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam dayan ha'emet. Praise to you, Adonai, our God, creator of the universe, the righteous judge. Adonai natan v'Adonai lekach, yehi shem Adonai mevarach. God has given, and now God has taken away. Still, we bless the name of God. Vayashav ha'afar al ha'aretz k'shechaya v'haruach tashuv el ha'elohim asher natana. The dust returns to the earth as it was, but the spirit returns unto God who gave it. May the soul of Shirley Stone be bound up in the bond of life eternal. Friends, we know when we come into this world, there are loving hands to hold us and guide us. And when we exit from this world, it shall not be done in the hands of strangers, but in the hands of those who knew us and who loved us. So first I'm going to invite the members of the immediate family to place earth. We'll then conclude with the El Mole and the mourner's Kaddish. And following the Kaddish, we will then invite anyone else who wishes to place earth to do so. So if you'd like to come forward, we'll have you place earth. Are you holding my keys?
Don't let her near that ditch.
Yeah, or I'll be walking home. You got my keys? You have my keys. You ready to give them back? Oh, I need them more.
Oh, we're gonna give that whole space. That's a big one.
Grandchildren, if you're ready, grandchildren, have you come forward if you want to place earth?
I think Deborah's got it.
Okay. Hmm? Oh, okay. Somebody has to help. Sam? Okay, Sam, did you come forward? And where's
Doc.
Ryan? Okay.
Emma Rachamim, Shochein Bamromim, Semen Ochanachona, Tacha Kanfech, Ashkena, Bemalot, Kiroshim Otorim, Kizo Hararakia, Masirim, Et Yishmat Yakirenu, Shahalachala Olamot, Beganet, and the Hemenuchato. Ahana Baharachamim Astirechu, the Seter Knafech Leolamim, Betitzror, Bitzrorachayim et Nishmato. Adonai Chunachalato, V'yanuach B'shalom, Amishkavo V'nomar, Amen. O merciful God, exalted and full of compassion, grant perfect peace in your sheltering presence among the holy and pure, to the soul of Shirley Stone, who has gone to her eternal home. God of mercy, we beseech you to remember all the worthy and righteous deeds that she performed in the land of the living. May Shirley's soul be bound up in the bound of life. God is her portion. May she rest in peace. And to this we say, Amen. Amen. We continue now with the words of the mourner's Kaddish as we recite together. Yitkadal, Yitkadash, Shemei Rabbah, Bi'alma, Divra, Birute, Bi'amlich, Malchute, B'chayechon, Uvyomechon, Uv'chaye, Dechol, Beit Yisrael, Ba'agala, Uvizman, Kariv, V'imru, Amen. Yehei Shmei Rabba Mevarach Leolam Ulamei Almaya Yitbarach V'yishtabach V'yitpa'ar V'yitromam V'yitaseh V'yitadar V'yitaleh V'yitalal Shmei Dekudisha B'rifu Le'ela U'leila Min Kol Birchata V'shirata Tushbechata V'nechamata Da'amiran Bi'alma Bi'imru Amen. Yehei Shlama Rabba Min Shemaya V'chayim Aleinu Bi'al Kol Yisrael Bi'imru Amen. Oseh Shalom B'imramav Hu Yaseh Shalom Aleinu Bi'al Kol Yisrael Bi'imru. We pray that God, who makes peace in a high place, will send peace and comfort to you, the mourners, to Israel, and to all humankind. And to this we say, Amen.